In this episode, we talk about the economic reforms that have been made under the previous two BJP-led governments and the challenges that the NDA will face as part of a coalition this time. We also tell you about the 5 trekkers from Karnataka who died in Uttarakhand after getting stuck in bad weather. But first, we talk about why the BJP lost Ayodhya to the Samajwadi Party. Hi, I'm Shashank Bhargava and you're listening to Three Things, the Indian Express news show. The consecration of the Ram Temple, which took place on the 22nd of January, was among the BJP's key ideological projects and one of its biggest calling cards this election. The ceremony was attended by thousands across the country and celebrated by Hindus nationwide. However, 4 months later, in a result that stunned almost everyone, the party lost the Faizabad Lok Sabha seat, of which Ayodhya is a part. And this is despite the party's efforts to transform the small temple town by constructing an international airport, renovating its railway station, and widening roads. In this segment, my colleague Niharika Nanda speaks to Indian Express's Dheeraj Mishra about the reasons for this electoral setback for the Saffron Party.
Dheeraj, can you begin by talking about what were the BJP's political expectations after the Ram Temple consecration, especially when it comes to a state like UP?
Well, Niharika, it's pretty obvious that, BJP was expecting a big impact of Ram Mandir consecration ceremony, not only in Ayodhya, but across UP and other parts of country also. But the irony is BJP lost a seat in Ayodhya itself and also in different parts of country. So yeah, they had a very huge expectation that Ram Mandir will help BJP to get them more and more seats. And this is what the BJP and their political leaders, from Prime Minister Narendra Modi to even the booth level and Panna Pramukh, they propagated Ram Mandir as a big achievement of BJP Bharatiya Janata Party, though it was constructed after the order of Supreme Court. But yes, it was being propagated as if that, construction of Ram Mandir became possible only when Narendra Modi government came to power, and it is all the efforts of the government that made it possible to Ram Mandir become a reality. The biggest impact that they were expecting, it was from Uttar Pradesh, but in Uttar Pradesh itself, BJP, they were hoping to get more than around 70-75 seats as the different leaders were claiming, but they could get only 33 seats. And Samajwadi Party emerged as the largest winning party in Uttar Pradesh. They got 37 seats. And also Congress performance is also very good in Uttar Pradesh. They got 6 seats. Also the coalition, the NDA partner RLD, they got 2 seats. So yes, the results in itself is very clear to say Ram Mandir did not work that well for the BJP.
Right. And you also had the opportunity to talk to people in Ayodhya. Talk about what they had to say about it.
Yeah, so the construction of Ram Mandir is one thing, but the transformation of Ayodhya, which led to the widening of roads, which led to the demolitions of many houses, shops, different type of construction that were just beside the earlier roads in Ayodhya, and in a way the government, they widened the road and it is now called Rampath. It starts from Saadatganj and goes to the Naya Ghat, that is a Saryu Ghat. So it's around 14 kilometer stretch long road that was made specifically during the construction of Ram Temple. So a lot of people were very, very unhappy because the way their houses, their shops were demolished. One thing. Another thing was that they did not get that much compensation as they were expecting. So in a way, there are a number of people, they did not lose their house only, they lost their own complete livelihood. And this is what has worked very much against BJP. People were unhappy. And also the BJP's member of parliament from Ayodhya, from Faizabad, especially Faizabad constituency, Lallu Singh, he made a remark, which in a way Samajwadi Party encashed it very well. He said that BJP need 400 seats to change the constitution in one of the meeting. And his opponent Avadhesh Prasad, who just won election, he took this, see the BJP is coming to the power and they are demanding 400 seats and they will change the constitution and you are going to lose your reservation, your special rights and all. So these are some of the factors that has worked very much against the BJP. And people were saying that, okay, Ram is revered across the country. वो हमारे आराध्य हैं. But also people were saying that, this temple is not sufficient. We need some jobs. We need to save our livelihood. Okay, it's fine. You are taking our houses. You are demolishing the area in the name of construction. But you have to give something back to us in compensation, a proper compensation, and also a compensation in form of job. That would be a kind of hope for a family to rebuild again. But it seems that a lot of things did not happen on the ground.
Yeah, and you also write that many in Ayodhya didn't like that they were being treated as outsiders. Can you talk about that a bit and what people have to say about it now?
So a lot of companies, a lot of big businesses, a lot of big businessmen, those who have good money, they have come to Ayodhya and invested in different projects. It could be eatery, it could be hotels, it could be shops. There are a number of new things that is happening in Ayodhya, and a lot of people, a lot of outsiders are coming in Ayodhya, and the very own residents of Ayodhya, they are feeling that they are being alienated, they are being disregarded, and they were also saying that these big roads and all these things does not mean that much for the local people, because they were expecting something different from their own member of parliament, and probably he did not deliver in that way. And also the construction of apart from Mandir, the airport, the construction around the airport, the expansion of area around the airport, a lot of land is being acquisitioned by the government, and this is another big issue in Ayodhya, that you are taking our land, in whatever you want to take it, but the problem is, again, you are not giving us compensation. I mean, one thing is very clear, that they are very happy with the construction of Ram Mandir, though it is still under construction, it is partially built, they are very happy, but at the same time they are unhappy because they are saying that the local people, they have not been taken into account, they have not been considered, and whatever is happening in Ayodhya is being done while taking outsiders in their mind.
Dheeraj, talk about the numbers a bit. Tell us, how many votes did Avdesh Prasad from the Samajwadi Party win by? What were the margins like?
I mean, he has won the seat, and he has won the seat by the margin of 54,567 votes. That's a pretty much very big margin. There were people who were saying that, we knew that Lalu Singh is going to lose election, but we didn't know that the margin will be so big. So he has won by over 54,000 votes. He got 5.5 lakh votes, and Lalu Singh got 4.99 lakh votes. There was a BSP candidate also, Sachindra Pandey. He got 46,000 votes at the constituency. So yeah, I mean, in a way, it's a historical win also for Samajwadi Party. And this is his, in a way, 10th win. He won the MLA election for 9 times. And this is for the first time he will go into the parliament.
Right. And tell us a bit about Avdesh himself, and what did he have to say about this win?
Well, he is a very senior leader of Samajwadi Party. He is among the founders of Samajwadi Party. And, he started his political career at the age of only 21. And he went in jail also during the emergency period. Initially, he was in Bharatiya Kranti Dal. So the first election he fought was in 1974. Now he is 79 years old and he has won the election again. I think that he would be one of the oldest person in parliament in Lok Sabha this time. And when we were interviewing him, he was saying that I won because there are a number of factors, but there are 2-3 factors that he was emphasizing more. First, he said that BJP has disregarded Lord Ram. He said that BJP used to say that hum Ram ko laye hain, but ultimately people got to know that they are cheating Ayodhya Vasis and people of India in the name of Ram. That is what Avdesh Prasad said. Then he later said that claiming that you will change the constitution after getting 400 seats, that is not good. You should not say this. Because he himself is a Dalit leader. He is one of the very popular, very senior Dalit leader among Samajwadi Party.
Right, and he has also been saying that now he will try to get compensation for the people who have been uprooted in the process of transforming Ayodhya. But you also had a word with BJP's Lakshmikant Tiwari. How did he react to this defeat from the seat?
So, it was a very sad moment also for the supporters of BJP and, of course, Lallu Singh. And initially in the morning till the late afternoon, around 3 or 4 p.m., he was at the counting station. But when he got a sense, when he realized that I'm going to lose, he quietly came back to his election office in Ayodhya. And he gave a very short speech to his supporters, his volunteers and all. And he said that, कि हम आपका सम्मान नहीं बचा पाए, अयोध्या का सम्मान बचा नहीं पाए, और हो सकता है मुझ में ही कुछ कमी रही हो. And then he left. Also, they were saying that, when they were going village to villages, the strong resentment among the people was about this land acquisition and not getting a proper compensation. That is what the volunteers, the BJP supporters, they were very well aware of this. And they said that we gave these inputs to the party, to the people sitting at the higher level, but nothing happened. And also they said that, the service class, this whole issue of joblessness and, the Agniveer scheme and inflation, all these issues were very much, the people were affected because of this and they were talking about it.
And Dheeraj, as someone who has been reporting on this, what would you say are the biggest takeaways from this seat?
I think one message is very much clear that, you can't get votes solely on the religious lines. And I think this election, particularly Ayodhya, has put out a very strong message that, you can't just, of course, in India, religion, it's a very close, people are religious. It's a very emotional issue also. But voting is a very, very complex thing. And people do vote taking into account a number of factors. Religion could be one of the factors, but there are other factors as well. Also, people look from the angle of caste. That's a very ingrained issue in Indian community, that, which leader is talking about the people of deprived class, which politician is talking about OBC, rights of OBCs, which politician is talking about the rights of SC and ST community, who is talking about the Samvidhan, constitution, who is talking about the reservation. There are a number of factors that people takes into account. That is a reality. And also, this also gives a very strong message that, in the name of development, you can't do away with the due process. Due process means, you can't do development in a hurried manner, uprooting hundreds and thousands of people overnight and not providing them proper compensation just because that, a Ram Mandir temple is going to be built. They will seek accountability from you. And I feel that it's a good message also, this is how our politicians will be in check. And from the next time, maybe people in Ayodhya, maybe they will get proper concession and all this time.
And next we talk about the economic challenges that the new NDA government is likely to face, considering that the BJP does not have a majority this time. Now, the role of the government in shaping a country's economy cannot be overstated. And this is especially true for a country like India, where incomes are low and poverty is widespread.
And a lot of poverty essentially shows that we haven't figured out a way to be more productive. We haven't figured out a way to have more employment.
That's Indian Express's Udit Misra, who writes on the economy for the paper.
So the role of government is important because the government sets the rules for the economy. Who does what and how? What is allowed, what is not allowed? So that is that one big aspect of the role that government plays, that it sets the rules for the economy. And that allows things to happen and doesn't allow things to happen.
And besides deciding what can or cannot be done, he says the government also acts as an economic agent.
By that I mean that, just like you and I spend money for our consumption, and just like private sector spends money not just for its own consumption, but also for building a new building, a factory, capital investment in that sense, towards increasing the productive capacity, government does both by itself. It spends money for its own daily consumption, in the sense it pays salaries for day-to-day needs. It spends money. Then it also spends money for capital investment. Builds a lot of public goods. Public goods are things which otherwise private people will not build. So, building a road which allows two communities which were sort of divided by a river, a bridge is built and economic activity prospers. So that role. So both these roles are very important.
And so in this segment, we're taking a look at what the role of the NDA government has been in shaping the country's economy and the challenges that lie ahead for it, especially now that the BJP is set to form a government with its alliance partners. Partners it did not have to rely on in the previous two terms, having come to power with a majority. Now, when talking about the current political parties in India, Udit says that unlike the West, there are less distinctions between them as far as their approach to the economy is concerned.
However, within that limited distinction, the BJP and especially Mr. Narendra Modi has repeatedly argued for smaller role of the government. His mantra when he first came to power was minimum government, maximum governance, which was basically saying that the government in its size and scope will be much limited. It will be far more efficient in what it does, but it would be limited in size. And in sharp contrast, as it's emerging, Rahul Gandhi-led Congress is now actually talking about a lot more government than the Narendra Modi BJP, where Rahul Gandhi is talking about filling more vacancies in the government, giving more government jobs. Partly, it has to also do with the agenda about providing jobs to the people in the reserved category. If the government doesn't give any jobs, then there is no reserved category. There is no reservation effectively, because the private sector doesn't come under reservations in that sense. So we are now seeing a difference between the two parties to that extent. And the BJP has largely said that the role of the government should be to not interfere too much, although there's a lot of data which would say that they do interfere a lot. But on paper, they argue that the government should not interfere too much and that the private sector should be the real engine of growth.
He says that there is truth to this argument. India cannot sustainably grow without the private sector being the dominant engine of growth. But the government, he says, has the role of triggering these changes and ensuring that no one gets left behind. Now, when we look at the previous two terms of the BJP-led government, Udit says that they were particularly unique.
So I think the uniqueness of Mr. Modi's first two terms, which no longer exists this term, is that he had a single party majority. And this was the first two governments which had a single party majority since the economic reforms. So basically, something I've written in the past, quoting Montek Singh Ahluwalia, when he described that this was about the time when we didn't have the Narendra Modi government, all the years before that there was a strong consensus for weak reforms in India. Because these were coalition governments, everybody agreed that there should be a reform, but nobody was terribly sure what exactly should be the reform. Different people pulled in different directions. And so ultimately people agreed on a weaker economic reform. Under Modi, we could have had a very strong set of reforms.
One of them, he says, was the corporate tax cut in 2019. The idea behind which was to incentivize the private sector to invest more in the economy.
And through that route, create more jobs, more prosperity, overall demand will rise and everything will happen. That thing hasn't really worked out. And some can argue that that's a failure and the others can argue that we should wait for a little more time and at some length it will happen. But that was one big economic reform or economic call that this government took, which was towards building that kind of a role for the private sector.
The other thing he says is that they have kept a tighter leash on how much the government spends, which has been a problem in the past.
But by restricting the government's total expenditure, what this government has been trying to do is that it leaves more money for the private sector to borrow. There's only so much money available in terms of investable surplus. So that's the other big thing. The third is the push towards disinvestment. And this is something that is a legacy issue that's been sort of dragging for the last 30 years now since economic reforms, that since we had so many public sector enterprises in the hands of the government, we want to get rid of them and give it to the private sector, either to run them or do something else in that space, whatever. But for example, Air India is this shining example of what this government has been able to achieve. That the Air India sale had been stuck for almost 2 decades and Air India was making massive losses, and those losses essentially meant that our taxes paid for those losses. If Air India is not making money and making losses, you and I are basically paying for it. So that element that they could sell off Air India, even if it was at a pittance, they could at least get rid of a loss-making enterprise. And again, the overall experience of disinvestment isn't something tremendously to be proud of. They haven't been able to disinvest as much as they would want to. But again, just to list out a policy thrust that they have been committed to disinvestment.
So just to recap, some of the biggest reforms under the NDA's last 2 terms have been the corporate tax cut, reduced government spending, and disinvestment, all in an effort to bolster the private sector. Now, considering that we're going to see a real coalition government for the first time since the economic reforms, there are some who fear that implementing reforms might be a challenge. But here Udit points out that pretty much all our economic reforms started with a minority government.
It was in 1991 when the Congress government led by P.V. Narasimha Rao and Dr. Manmohan Singh as the finance minister was a minority government, and it actually discarded the whole centralized planning model, opened up the economy, gave up on the license permit Raj. A whole host of things were changed, including things like, joining WTO and becoming part of a global order. That government didn't have a brute majority. Neither did any of the governments succeeding it. During Prime Minister Deve Gowda's short-lived government, we had Mr. P. Chidambaram giving a dream budget. It was called a dream budget because it cut taxes, both for personal income tax, but also for corporates and customs duties. And it sort of unleashed this whole desire that, we can have lower taxes and still earn more revenue because the taxpayers will pay more because they'll adhere to tax rates.
And even later on, under the government led by Atal Bihari Vajpayee, several productive economic reforms were implemented. Reforms that focused on rural roads, insurance, and IT. And while arguably such changes can be much easier to implement in a majority government, it can come with its own set of problems. In the case of the government led by PM Modi, a good example would be demonetization.
This is something that must be understood. Demonetization had disastrous consequences through and through. Short term, long term, there was no upside to demonetization. And actually, demonetization is a great example of what can go wrong if you have a majority, single party majority, because then the Prime Minister is not even consulting anybody. In particular case is even worse than otherwise a single party majority because the Prime Minister doesn't seem to have consulted his own cabinet or the Finance Minister, or there was no broader consensus built into that. And that we saw even in, say, things like electoral bonds. Myself did a story which showed that the Prime Minister shot down proposals to have wider consultations with other political parties or the broader public on the issue of electoral bonds. So there is an issue with a single party actually running the government because it can get into a loop where it's not taking the feedback from the people or from other political constituents to bring about a reform.
So in that sense, even a majority government can come with a mixed bag.
So our journey has been of economic reforms. There's been a whole host of economic reforms. Some of the most fundamental economic reforms have happened in coalition governments. You could say that there's a lot left on the table when a coalition government is deciding. Things like what Mr. Modi's government actually achieved, like the GST or the IBC, Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code, or even the full force with which Aadhaar has been implemented, or the direct benefit transfer. These things were started in Congress's time. They were almost there, say direct benefit transfer also started in Congress's time, but it was done more effectively in Mr. Modi's time, and he could clinch the issue. So on many of these things, the larger narrative is that it's not as if a coalition government necessarily means no reforms. Of course, on paper, it makes sense for a government to know its own mind and not sort of dilly-dally. But Modi government's experience also tells us that it's not as if a single party majority can always achieve whatever it wants.
For example, reforms related to land, labor and farms is something that the Modi government could not achieve despite having a full majority.
And I think the larger wisdom for listeners here is that whether it is a single party majority or a coalition, there should be consensus building because India is again such a diverse country, such a large country, and states is where all the implementation has to happen. you have to bring in all the stakeholders. In terms of consensus building, a coalition government actually does better because it is in the design of the coalition government. And in terms of having a clarity, single party majority tends to have a greater clarity. But the record of the Modi government on this issue has been middling. It's not as if it's a complete success story.
Talking about the future, Udit says that the new government will have to continue to tackle two of India's biggest problems, inflation and unemployment, both of which are also connected to consumption levels being low. The fact that people aren't spending enough.
So this is one of the major issues, macroeconomic concerns that global investors have and Indian policymakers have, how to boost the consumption levels. And this is where, again, the Modi government has got it completely wrong. Because in 2019, as I said, they gave this economic reform, they gave this lovely gift to the corporate sector by cutting tax rates. And there can be a very good argument why tax rates should be cut for the corporates. But it was badly timed because it was around that time when our consumption was dipping. India's consumption levels were faltering. So at that time, we needed a consumption boost. We needed the government to spend its money differently. For example, if that time GST rates were cut, then consumption would have risen. And then the businesses would have found that there is a business case to invest. Whereas we did it differently. We gave a tax cut to the businesses, right? And they just pocketed the difference. Instead of paying the government, they just pocketed. Their profits went up. And that's why you saw the stock market rally. So India's stock market rallied at a time when India's economy was actually nosediving.
So the private sector made a lot of money because it didn't have to pay as much taxes, not because it could sell more things.
We also have concerns about poverty levels, inequality, rising inequality. Data recently that came out internationally showed that India's inequality levels are worse than what they were in colonial times. So we need to be cognizant of the fact that there are these social pulls and pressures that are happening. People who do not have money do not want to see such stark inequality levels. So something has to be done about it. And that is where the role of the government, where we started off the conversation, comes in. In an economy where there is no government, nothing can be done about inequality apart from hoping that the rich people give money through philanthropy. So yeah, I mean, that's the broad set of gamut of issues that India's economy is facing.
And in the end, we talk about 9 people from Karnataka who died during a trekking expedition to Sahastratal in Uttarkashi. The 9 people were part of a 22-member team who found themselves stuck in bad weather. When we spoke to Indian Express's Avaneesh Mishra, he told us more about it.
So this was a trekking team of 22 members, and this was organized by this Himalayan View Trekking Agency, and the trek started on May 29, and these 22 members were supposed to return by the June 7th, and this was the trek for Sahastratal, and this was supposed to go through Malla, Silla and Kush Kalyan.
He says initially around 4 members of the team fell ill, and only 18 people ended up finally trekking to Sahastratal, which is actually one of the least visited high-altitude treks in India. The place is at an altitude of 16,400 feet and is considered to be moderately difficult. Now, Avneesh says that it was while trekking back that the team encountered bad weather. Blizzards at around 12,000 feet that the survivors say lasted for more than 4 hours.
But they continued the trek, but unfortunately, 2 of the trekkers died on the route. Those 2 trekkers who stayed behind and spent the night there because returning was not possible. So during there, 2 more people died, and it was informed the next day that 4 people have died and the rest are kind of trapped over there. Then, there were operations underway to save these 2 people. Air Force choppers were involved. Teams of the SDRF were also sent to kind of find those people.
But unfortunately, 9 of them passed away and only 13 of them got rescued. He says the information about the trekkers reached the local administration on Tuesday around 4 p.m.
And after that, the DM there, Mehban Singh Bisht, he immediately requested the SDRF to dispatch rescue teams and also instructed the local teams to reach the site. And also services of heli rescue operations and the Air Force was also kind of called because this place is situated at a very high altitude. Other than that, because this place is on the border of Uttarkashi and Tirhi Garhwal, both the police departments were also involved along with the Nehru Mountaineering Institute, which is in Uttarkashi. Help of the ITBP, the Indo-Tibetan Border Police, was also taken. But mostly this was done with the help of helicopters because of, the high altitudes. As the information came very late in the evening, there was a delay and the teams on the ground could start the journey only the next morning. And because this entire thing happened because of bad weather, this bad weather kind of also hindered the entire process of the rescue operations. And probably because of that, 9 of the trekkers could not be saved.
You were listening to 3 Things by the Indian Express. Today's show was edited and mixed by Suresh Pawar and was produced by Niharika, Nanda and me, Shashank Bhargava. If you liked the show, then do subscribe to us wherever you get your podcasts. You can also recommend the show to someone you think will like it, share it with a friend or someone in your family. It's the best way to get to know about us. You can also tweet us at Express Audio and write to us at podcast@indianexpress.com.